I love pleated lampshades, and over the past couple years I've tried my hand at making several, and I've always done it in a way where I ironed pleats in and then glued it to the shade and added like a sewed band on the top. Recently I tried a new no-sew method, and mine turned out I'm really happy with how this turned out. I was able to get it nice and even at the bottom. I didn't have to sew, I just used a steam iron and hot glue. I still have to add the banding to the top and bottom of this one. It does use a lot more fabric than you think. So like this, for example, I had just barely enough to finish. I had to use what I was planning to use on the top and bottom to finish around the shade. So I would say if you do this, make sure you have enough fabric to wrap fully around the shade you want to use 3 times. I was covering up a shade that did belong to this lamp. I just didn't like the shade. It's really worn out. So I think this is a great way if you've got like a worn out, cracked, yucky plastic lampshade. This is a great way to cover it. If you are going out and buying a separate lampshade for your lamp, that's kind of a different story, and make sure that you get the right size for your lamp. There's all kinds of guidelines online for that. But I'm going to show you my new favorite way to do this, and maybe I'll make another video about the other ways I've tried too, because they're equally valid, and I've been able to make some that you don't have to glue at the bottom that are more like a skirt, but that'll be for another time. But let's dive into it. I'm going to cover this little lamp that's in my kitchen. This shade is cracked and it's got some grease splatters and stains, and it just needs a refresh, but I love having a lamp in the kitchen, and this one's nice and tiny and fits in there well. So here's the shade. It's definitely seen better days, but I'm going to cover it with a scrap of material that I have from when I made the kitchen curtains, so it's going to match the kitchen curtains. I'm pretty excited about that. First, I just double checked that I had about enough fabric. Like I said before, I think if you have enough fabric to sort of loosely wrap around your shade 3 times, you should have enough to pleat it and cover it and have enough for some banding on the top and the bottom. So I'm satisfied that I have enough, and I'm going to start measuring and cutting. I'm going to take my tape measure and measure the length from the very top to the very bottom of this lampshade, and then I'm going to cut out strips of fabric that are just that long. This particular lampshade happened to be 6.5 inches long, so I'm going to cut out my fabric strips to be exactly 6.5 inches long, but obviously it depends on the length of your particular lampshade. To save myself some time, I actually folded this piece of fabric in half because it was wide enough that if it's folded in half and I cut out 6-inch long strips, I can cut out twice as many at the same time having it folded in half. So if you do have a piece long enough, consider doing that, because the one part of this process that gets a little tedious is cutting out all of those strips. I ironed the fabric before I started cutting because I want it to look really, really crisp and neat, of course, when it's on the shade. So it is really important to get it ironed flat, and you can do that before you cut out your strips. I decided to cut these 2 inches wide. This is completely up to you. However wide or narrow you want the pleats to appear on your shade. 2 inches will give you, in my opinion, what's kind of like the standard pleated lampshade look, but you could make them a little tighter for a tighter look, or wider for a nice wide pleat. It's completely up to you. You might want to experiment, but mine are 2 inches wide. So then I just cut each strip out one at a time, except I'm actually doing double because my fabric is folded in half. Once I have it cut out, I just unfold the strip, or I'm just cutting off a little bit of the raw edge at the bottom. It was like a thread or something. I unfold it, and then I can cut it again right in the middle where the crease is. And then voila, I have 2 strips ready for in the time that it took one. And I'm just going to test to make sure before I keep going that I actually measured correctly and that it's going to fit. So yeah, that's what you want. It doesn't matter about there being raw edges or anything, just so it
fits exactly from the top to the bottom of the shade. And then just continue going until I just kind of eyeballed it. I ended up with a few extra strips. I guess you could try to measure precisely and only get as many strips as you absolutely needed, or you can just kind of eyeball it and think, I think this is about enough. And then if you run out while you're gluing, you could always go back and cut some more too. To cut the rest of the strips, I just laid my already cut strip over the fabric I needed to cut and just followed that as a guide. Once all of my strips were cut out, it was time to iron them into the pleats. So I just put the right side of the fabric face down on the ironing board and folded in one side and then folded in the other side to meet the edge of the opposite side. This is another place where you have a chance to make them narrower or wider depending on where you decide to fold and iron them. But I found it just to be easier to fold one in and make the other one fold up and over and meet the other side. And that way I was sure that they were all going to be exactly the same width. Once I had all my strips cut out and ironed, it was time to start gluing them onto my lampshade. So I just took my hot glue gun and plugged it in and just took one strip at a time, put a tiny dot of glue at the top and at the bottom of the shade, and then stuck on the fabric strips, slightly overlapping one over the other. Now, just a word here, most lampshades, this one isn't as extreme as, for example, the one behind me, but a lot of them are really a lot smaller at the top than they are at the bottom. And this is where these pleated lampshades can get a little bit tricky. Doing it this way with the glue is the easiest way to make it not tricky. But other ones that I've tried, anyway, that's another story. But just pay close attention and fan out the strips at the bottom so that they're overlapping at the bottom. So you're gonna, when you're gluing them on, it kind of, they don't go straight up and down. They're gonna kind of go at an angle, but you just kind of get the feel of it. It's just based on how it looks. You just want to have it so there's just kind of a little, it's like a sort of diagonal fanning that you have to do, and it just depends on the length of your shade, but it's pretty simple to control it since you are just gluing the top and the bottom of each strip. So you just have to watch and make sure that it looks right. And like I said, I'm repeating myself, but it's going to be kind of at a slight angle as it goes from the top to the bottom. And a few of mine I had to go back and kind of move them around because they didn't look quite right. There's just something about that conical shape where it's smaller at the top and then fans out wider at the bottom. You have to mimic and match that with what you're doing with your fabric strips. But then you just go all the way around your whole shade until you end up back where you started. And we are almost done now. The last part of this project is to put a finishing band, a strip of fabric at the top and at the bottom of the shade. So this is done the exact same way as you made these shorter fabric strips that went vertical. You're just going to need a longer band, one that fits around the top and one that fits around the bottom. And to do that, I just took my measuring tape and I measured the circumference of the bottom of my shade and the circumference of the top of my shade. And then I cut out 2 fabric strips from my remaining fabric that were those corresponding lengths. So I cut those out. Those were also the 2 inches wide. I made them 2 inches wide, and then whatever the length of the bottom of the shade was and the length of the top of the shade was. Then I ironed them so they'll be nice and crisp. And I turned the fabric facing down and folded in one side and then the other side to meet it at its edge, just like I did with the strips, the vertical strips. And then I just glued this band to the bottom, and it covers up all of the raw edges of the strips. I just put one strip of glue, and then I put a strip of glue kind of where it seemed to make sense as I wrapped it around. You don't need too many, but there might be some places where maybe 2 or 3 dots of glue, and then you close it around and meet it up in the back and glue all that down. Once you've glued that band of fabric to the top and the bottom of your shade, you can just go along with scissors and maybe clip any stray threads that are hanging. I had a few, even after I put the bands on, that were hanging out the bottom. Just clip those off so it all looks nice and neat. That's all there is to it. The last step is to put the lampshade back on your lamp and admire your beautiful new pleated lampshade. I hope you try this out. Let me know in the comments how it goes for you, and please like this video so that more people can see it. And please subscribe to my channel for more old world DIY content. And I can't wait to hear from all of you how your pleated lampshades turn out. Bye for now. Take care.